welcome. If you are watching and listening now, it means you have chosen to give yourself a pause, a moment entirely your own, away from the noise of the day. This is Opulent Dreams, a place where time slows down, where stories flow gently, and where sleep arrives without being called. Tonight, I have the privilege of guiding you slowly towards rest. There is nothing you need to do. Simply listen and let go. If you wish, you can support this journey with a small gesture by following the channel, liking this video, and leaving a comment telling us where you are watching from tonight. A quiet way of being present together, even from afar. For now, though, this time is yours. Lower the lights. Settle into a comfortable position. Allow your body to find its own balance. Soften your breathing. There is no need to control it. Just allow it to slow down. The world can wait. Your worries can remain outside this night. I wish you a deep, elegant, natural rest. Let yourself be gently carried. And when you are ready, let the dream begin. The Ionian Sea breathes gently tonight, with that deep calm that only comes after years of storms. The full moon rises over the rocky hills of Ithaca, bathing the calm waters surrounding the island in silver light. It is a summer night, warm and still, and the air carries the salty scent of the sea mixed with the sweet perfume of the olive trees growing on the slopes. Ancient trees that have watched entire generations pass beneath their silvery shade. High on a promontory overlooking the harbour stands the royal palace. Its limestone walls, polished smooth by wind and time, reflect the moonlight with a soft, almost golden glow. Columns of dark wood, carved with scenes of waves and dolphins, support a roof beneath which, tonight, everything remains at peace. Odysseus walks slowly along the terrace of his palace. Some time has passed since his return, since the storms of fate finally brought him back to this small, rocky land that never stopped calling to him, even in the most distant moments of his long journey. And now, as he does every night, he prefers to walk alone, feeling beneath his feet the familiar stone of his home, breathing air he once believed he would never breathe again. His figure, lit by the silver moonlight, moves with the calm of a man no longer in any hurry. There is no urgency in his steps, no battles to fight tonight, no raging seas to cross, only the soft sound of waves breaking, far below, against the cliff rocks, and the distant call of some night bird lost among the olive trees. He pauses beside the stone balustrade, gazing at the harbour spreading out below. The fishermen's boats rest, gently rocking upon the dark water, their shapes barely visible in the moonlight. Small torches, lit in a few houses along the shore, flicker like fallen stars scattered upon the earth. The palace behind him remains silent. The servants have already retired for the night, and only a few oil lamps remain lit in the main halls, casting a warm, dim light through windows open to the night. Odysseus breathes deeply. This air, he thinks, carries a flavour found nowhere else in the world. Sea salt, wild thyme, olive wood burning in some nearby hearth. It is the scent of Ithaca, the very scent he carried with him for so many years, in memory, like a treasure more precious than any gold he might have gathered on his travels. From the terrace, he can also see the orchards surrounding the palace, those orderly rows of olive trees and vines that his father and his father's father cultivated patiently across generations. Beneath the moonlight, The silvery leaves of the olive trees stir gently with the night breeze, creating a steady, almost hypnotic whisper that accompanies every one of his thoughts. A little farther east, the dark silhouette of the mountains dividing the island can be seen. Those same mountains Odysseus learned to know since childhood, as one knows the face of a beloved person. Every rock, every path, every solitary tree on the hillside form part of his deepest memory. That memory which sustained him through the years of absence, through nights in strange lands, beneath unfamiliar skies. The king of Ithaca remains there, motionless for a long while, simply watching his sleeping kingdom. There is no need for words tonight, no need to think of tomorrow's responsibilities, of decisions awaiting him as ruler, of palace matters that will claim his attention with the coming dawn. Tonight, Odysseus is, simply, a man who has come home, a man contemplating the calm sea beneath the moon, listening to the eternal whisper of the olive trees, breathing the familiar air of a land that never stopped waiting for him. And as the night wears on, slow and silent, the entire palace seems to breathe alongside him, wrapped in that deep peace known only to those who have travelled distant worlds, and who, finally, after so long, have returned to the place where they always belonged. One might imagine that a man like Odysseus, king of Ithaca, hero of 1,000 tales told by the fireside, would live surrounded by constant luxury, given over entirely to the privileges of his rank. And yet, those who knew him closely understood that his daily life held a surprising simplicity, a calm rooted in the earth that few expected to find in a king. Odysseus rose early, long before the sun fully appeared over the island's eastern mountains. He liked to walk barefoot on the cool stone of his chamber, feeling the freshness of morning before the day's heat covered everything. He needed no one to wake him. Years of sailing, of night watches on unstable decks, had taught him to sleep lightly, to open his eyes at the first hint of light. It is said that, even as king, he preferred to dress with his own hands, without the help of servants, a habit that surprised foreign visitors accustomed to the more ostentatious courts of other lands. His tunic, though woven from fine wool, showed no unnecessary adornment. He always wore, however, a bronze brooch worked into the shape of a dolphin, an old gift carrying deep meaning for him, a silent reminder of his bond with the sea. He often devoted his mornings to walking through his own orchards and vineyards, something that surprised even his closest advisers. Though he was king, he had never lost a genuine fondness for working the land, for tending the olive trees his father, Laertes, still cultivated with his own hands despite his advanced age. It is said that more than once Odysseus was seen working alongside the farmers, helping to prune the branches of the oldest olive trees, or personally inspecting the quality of the grapes before harvest. He did not do this out of necessity, but out of deep respect for the land that had seen him born, and for the quiet labour that sustained the prosperity of his small kingdom. His breakfast was simple, almost humble for a man of his position. Freshly baked barley bread, cured goat cheese, olives from his own groves, and a little wine generously mixed with fresh water. He preferred these simple, honest flavors to the more elaborate dishes other kings demanded each morning. During the central hours of the day, when the sun beat down heavily upon the island, Odysseus attended to matters of governance. He received the elders of Ithaca, listened to disputes between neighbors over land boundaries or fishing rights, and made decisions with a wisdom his years of travel, of facing different peoples and cultures, had generously granted him. His patience, it is said, was legendary. He listened to each person with full attention, unhurried, perhaps remembering lessons learned during his long journey home, when patience had often been the only tool that allowed him to survive. In the afternoons, when the heat began to ease, he liked to sit in a small inner courtyard of the palace, a quiet space surrounded by low columns, where a grapevine heavy with fruit offered cool shade. There, often in silence, he watched the play of light the setting sun created among the leaves, while the scent of nearby jasmine mixed gently with the afternoon air. His wife, Penelope, would often join him in these calm moments, sitting beside him with her spindle, weaving with that infinite patience that had become legendary during the long years of waiting. Between them, in those quiet evenings, existed a comfortable silence, the silence of those who have endured together, though separated by distance, the hardest trials of fate. The nights, as we have already seen, he devoted to walking alone along the palace terraces, gazing at the sea, listening to the whisper of the olive trees, letting his mind wander freely among memories of distant lands, and the quiet satisfaction of finally being home. So passed the days of Odysseus, king of a small rocky realm, a man who had known the wealth of foreign palaces, the favour of the gods, and also their wrath, and who nevertheless found his true happiness in the simplicity of a life close to the earth, the sea, and the people he loved. Though Odysseus's daily life was marked by remarkable simplicity, the royal palace of Ithaca, seat of his lineage for generations, held treasures and splendors that revealed the king's true standing among the great lords of the Greek world. The main hall of the palace, where Odysseus received his most important visitors, rose with columns of cypress wood, carefully carved with marine motifs, waves, dolphins, and creatures of the deep Mediterranean. The high ceiling, supported by dark beams, let bands of golden light fall by day across the polished stone floor, creating a constant play of light and shadow. On the walls, tapestries woven with wool dyed purple. That precious colour, extracted from small sea snails, depicted scenes from mythology, gods of Olympus, fantastical creatures, and the king's own legendary voyages, told and retold so many times that they had become part of the very soul of the palace. The royal throne, set at the far end of the hall, was not ostentatious in shape, but certainly in the materials that composed it. Carved from centuries-old olive wood, it was adorned with inlays of ivory and small, semi-precious stones, amber brought from distant northern lands, and details of silver that glowed softly beneath torchlight. The banquets held in this hall, though less frequent than in other, more ostentatious courts, held a splendour all their own, laden with meaning and tradition. Great wooden tables filled with trays of fresh fish, caught that very morning in the crystalline waters surrounding the island, grilled octopus seasoned with wild herbs, and lamb slowly cooked with honey and rosemary. The wine, served in finely decorated ceramic cups, came from the kingdom's own vineyards, a dark, aromatic wine that foreign visitors praised with astonishment, surprised to find such quality on so small and seemingly humble an island. It is said that, among the palace's most private treasures, kept in wooden chests reinforced with bronze, Odysseus preserved objects of incalculable value, gifts received during his years of travel, presents offered by foreign kings grateful for his wisdom, or simply tokens of respect toward a man whose fame had already crossed the borders of the known world. Among these treasures, tales spoke of cups of pure gold, worked with extraordinary delicacy, of tunics woven with threads of silver that shone like the sea itself beneath the sun, and of ancient jewels whose origins were lost in stories so distant that not even Odysseus himself fully remembered their source. And yet, something many visitors remarked upon with astonishment: Odysseus rarely displayed these treasures openly. He kept them with the same quiet respect with which he kept his own memories, as though he knew that true wealth lay not in accumulated gold, but in the experiences lived, in the lessons learned across so many years of voyage. The palace's inner gardens, visible from several of the main halls, offered another kind of wealth, quieter but equally precious. Small stone fountains, fed by the island's natural springs, created a steady, soothing sound that drifted gently into the palace interior, mingling with the scent of Mediterranean flowers growing in every available corner. The private chambers of Odysseus and Penelope, located in the palace's most protected wing, held that same elegant simplicity that characterized the king. A bed, legend says, carved with great skill directly from the living trunk of an ancient olive tree growing at the very heart of the palace, a secret shared only between the two of them, a silent symbol of a union as deep and rooted as the very roots of that tree. And so, between the simplicity of his daily habits and the discreet yet undeniable splendor of his palace, Odysseus ruled his small kingdom with a wisdom forged in distant lands, always aware that the true opulence of his life could not be measured in gold and treasure alone, but in the quiet peace of having finally returned to the place his heart had always belonged. Oh, there were nights, few but memorable, when Odysseus agreed to share fragments of his long journey home, those stories already forming part of the legends sung by bards in distant courts far beyond the shores of Ithaca. He did not like to speak too much of those years. He preferred, as we have seen, the quiet calm of the present over constantly reliving the trials of the past. But on special occasions, when some distinguished visitor arrived at the palace, or during some quiet evening by the fire with his closest family, he allowed a few memories to rise to the surface, always told in an unhurried voice, almost a whisper, as one recounting a distant dream rather than a lived experience. He spoke, for instance, of the Trojan War, though he never dwelt too long on the details of battle. He preferred instead to recall the clever stratagem of the great wooden horse, an idea he himself conceived, which finally allowed the Greeks to end 10 long years of conflict. He told it almost humbly, as though that feat belonged more to the collective memory of his people than to his own personal glory. Of the journey home, the one that stretched on for 10 additional years, crossing unknown seas and facing challenges that would test the spirit of any man, he spoke with even greater restraint. He mentioned, only in passing, encounters with extraordinary creatures, with peoples of strange customs, with gods who sometimes favored his cause and other times became his greatest obstacle. He recalled, with a distant smile, the cunning that so often saved him from impossible situations, that sharp intelligence the gods themselves recognized, which had earned him both praise and further trials. He spoke of distant islands, of winds that toyed with sailors' fates, of temptations that tested not only his body, but also his will to return, one day, to the arms of his beloved Ithaca. But above all, when he spoke of those years, Odysseus always returned to one same point: the quiet strength of hope, the deep certainty, even in the darkest moments, that Ithaca awaited him, that Penelope, faithful among the faithful, continued weaving her destiny with that same infinite patience with which she unwove each night the shroud she wove by day, cleverly keeping at bay the suitors who coveted his throne during his long absence. He spoke, too, in an even softer voice, of his son Telemachus, who had grown during his absence into a man worthy of inheriting the throne of Ithaca. The pride in his voice, when mentioning his son, revealed a different side of the great hero, that of a father who had lost precious years alongside his family, and who now treasured every shared moment with renewed intensity. At times, some curious visitor would ask about the most famous details of his voyage, eager to hear from his own lips the stories already circulating, transformed and embellished throughout the Greek world. Odysseus, however, preferred to gently steer these conversations towards simpler matters, closer to the peaceful present he had finally managed to build. He preferred to speak of the taste of wine from his own land, of the comforting sound of waves against the rocks of Ithaca, of the simple pleasure of watching his olive trees grow year after year, as though, after so many years of extraordinary adventures, the true wealth he wished to share was not the glory of his deeds, but the deep serenity of a simple life, finally recovered after a journey that had tested every fibre of his being. And so, between whispers and silences, between stories only hinted at and memories kept with fondness, the legend of Odysseus continued to grow, not through what he himself recounted in detail, but through what he wisely left in the quiet space of his listener's imagination. During the long years of his journey home, Odysseus had crossed extraordinary lands, kingdoms ruled by men and women of great power, courts where generosity toward a distinguished stranger was often measured in gifts of incalculable value. And though he preferred not to speak openly of these treasures, some accounts had reached over time the curious ears of Ithaca's people. It was said, for instance, that during his stay at the court of the Phaeacians, the people who finally helped him return home, King Alcinous had ordered gifts worthy of the greatest hospitality to be given to him. Cups of pure gold worked with exquisite detail, tunics woven with the finest threads, and chests filled with precious objects that the Phaeacian nobles themselves had contributed, each with pride, as a token of respect toward a man whose story had already deeply moved them during the banquets held in his honor. These treasures, so the stories go, finally arrived in Ithaca, hidden within the depths of a cave near the coast, protected by the local nymphs, until Odysseus, already back home, could recover them calmly, far from covetous eyes that might endanger his newly recovered fortune. There was also talk, though in a lower voice, of other encounters during his long journey, of gifts offered by powerful figures whose favor he had won through his legendary cunning, or whose wrath he had managed to calm with wise words and prudent decisions. Strange and marvelous objects, some of origins not even Odysseus himself fully understood, formed part of this quiet collection he kept with the same care with which he kept his most intimate memories. And yet, What most surprised those who knew the king of Ithaca closely was not so much the quantity of these treasures, but the serene attitude with which he treated them. Unlike other powerful men who displayed their riches as a constant symbol of status and dominance, Odysseus preferred to keep these objects stored away, almost forgotten in the depths of his palace. It was said that, more than once, he had given away pieces of incalculable value to travelers in need, to merchants who had suffered losses at sea, or simply to Ithacan families going through difficult times. He felt no special attachment to accumulated gold, perhaps because his true treasure, the one he had sought through so many years of uncertain wandering, could not be measured in precious metals or exotic jewels. His true wealth, the one he valued above all else, was the time recovered alongside his family, the chance to grow old peacefully beside Penelope, to watch his son Telemachus grow into a wise and courageous man, to walk each morning among his own olive groves, feeling beneath his feet the firm, secure soil of home. Even so, the treasures existed, and their quiet presence in the depths of the palace served as a constant reminder of an extraordinary journey, of trials overcome through intelligence and perseverance, of a fate that, despite so many hardships, had finally led Odysseus back to the place where he had always belonged. On nights when the full moon lit the palace especially well, it was said that Odysseus would descend alone to the cave near the coast, where part of these treasures remained kept, not to gaze upon the gleam of gold, but to remember, in silence, each face, each distant land, each challenge overcome during those years that had finally brought him to this moment of well-earned peace. And so, between the quiet gleam of treasures gathered and kept with humility and the far deeper wealth of a recovered family life, Odysseus continued to show, night after night, that a man's true opulence is measured not only in what he possesses, but in the wisdom with which he learns to value what truly matters. Within the grounds of the palace of Ithaca lay a corner, especially dear to Odysseus, a private orchard stretching in descending terraces toward the cliff's edge, where the constant sound of the Ionian Sea arrived like an eternal melody, present at every hour of day and night. This orchard, tended with care across generations, held a careful arrangement that revealed the royal family's deep love for the land that had seen them born. Orderly rows of century-old olive trees, some planted by Odysseus's own father, Laertes, rose with twisted trunks and silvery leaves that gleamed softly under any kind of light, whether the bright midday sun or the silver glow of the moon. Among the olive trees, small clusters of fig trees offered cool shade during the hottest hours, their broad leaves creating a natural shelter where Odysseus often sat during quiet afternoons, listening to the steady hum of bees visiting the wildflowers that had sprung up spontaneously among the orchard's tended rows. Farther down, toward the cliff's edge, aromatic plants grew, perfuming the air with every sea breeze. Wild rosemary, thyme, and small clusters of oregano the servants regularly gathered for the palace kitchens, their scent constantly mingled with the salty smell rising from the sea, creating a fragrance unique to Ithaca, unmistakably its own. Odysseus spent long hours in this orchard, especially during the early afternoon, when the heat began to soften and a cool breeze began to blow in from the Ionian Sea. He walked slowly among the rows of olive trees, pausing occasionally to check the condition of the branches, to pull some weed, or simply to feel beneath his fingers the rough, familiar texture of the bark of these trees that had silently witnessed so many generations of his family. The sound of the sea, constantly present from this private corner of the palace, held a hypnotic rhythm that Odysseus had come to deeply appreciate after his years at sea. It was no longer the raging sea that had tested his courage on so many occasions during his long journey, but a calm, almost domestic sea, breaking gently against the cliff rocks with a steady, comforting murmur. In the afternoons, as the sun began to descend toward the western horizon, golden light filtered through the silvery leaves of the olive trees, creating a silent spectacle Odysseus often watched, seated upon a flat stone at the highest point of the orchard, from where he could observe both his own olive groves and the calm vastness of the sea stretching beyond. On these quiet afternoons, his son Telemachus often joined him, and father and son shared moments of comfortable silence, watching together as the sun slowly sank into the sea, tinting the sky in shades of orange and violet that trembled, reflected upon the water's surface. When night finally fell, the orchard transformed into a different place, wrapped in soft shadows and nighttime sounds. Crickets began their steady song among the roots of the olive trees, while the scent of the aromatic plants intensified with the cool of night, creating a dense, relaxing atmosphere that invited stillness. The murmur of the Ionian Sea, present throughout the day, grew especially noticeable during these night hours, when the island's general silence allowed every wave breaking gently against the rocks, every sigh of wind through the silvery olive leaves to be heard more clearly. Odysseus, on these quiet nights, found in his private orchard a peace that neither the most valuable treasures nor the most extraordinary tales of his long journey could ever offer him. Only the earth beneath his feet, the familiar scent of his own olive groves, and the eternal sound of the sea that had finally returned him, safe and sound, to this small paradise that had always been and would always be his true home. The night has grown deep over the small island of Ithaca. The stars now cover the entire sky, a shining blanket reflected, trembling softly upon the calm waters of the Ionian Sea surrounding the kingdom. In the palace, the last oil lamps slowly go out, letting the silver light of the full moon become the only companion through the silent halls and empty corridors. The servants already rest in their chambers, and only the distant sound of waves breaking against the cliff accompanies the deep silence of this late hour. Odysseus, wrapped in a light tunic, makes his last walk of the night along the terraces of his palace, the same path he has walked so many times since his return, always with that same unhurried calm, always with that same deep feeling of quiet gratitude. He pauses, as on so many other nights, beside the stone balustrade from where he can gaze upon the harbour and the sea beyond. The fishermen's boats rest, gently rocking upon the dark water, their shapes barely visible beneath the silver light of the full moon generously lighting the entire bay. He thinks, perhaps, of the treasures kept quietly in the depths of his palace, of memories of distant lands and extraordinary peoples he came to know during his long journey. He thinks too of his olive orchard, of the eternal sound of the Ionian Sea he has come to love so deeply, of the simple happiness of a life recovered after so many years of forced absence. His son Telemachus already sleeps in his own chambers, resting after a day spent learning, alongside his father, the responsibilities he will one day inherit as future king of Ithaca. Penelope, his faithful wife, rests too, her spindle finally at ease after years of infinite patience, her heart calm, knowing her beloved husband sleeps, each night, beneath the same roof as her. The whole island seems to breathe calmly beneath the starlit sky. From the highest hills to the small fishermen's houses along the shore, Ithaca rests, protected by the silent presence of its king, by the peaceful solidity of a kingdom that, after so many trials, has finally found its balance and its peace. Odysseus breathes deeply the fresh night air, that air carrying familiar scents, sea salt, wild thyme, olive wood, and that gentle breeze constantly arriving from the Ionian Sea, reminding him each night of the extraordinary fortune of having finally returned to this small, rocky paradise that never stopped waiting for him. Little by little, his steps carry him back toward his private chambers, where Penelope already rests beneath the soft blankets of their bed, carved from the living trunk of that ancient olive tree, a silent symbol of a union that has withstood, with patience and love, fate's hardest trials. He lies down beside her, feeling the comforting weight of sleep beginning, slowly, to wrap around him. The sound of the sea, distant but always present, blends in his mind with memories of far-off lands, with the scent of his own olive groves, with the quiet certainty of finally being exactly where he was always meant to be. And as his eyes close slowly, as his breathing grows slower and deeper, all of Ithaca seems to sleep alongside him, in that same unhurried rhythm, in that same infinite calm known only to those who, after a long and difficult journey, have finally found their way home. The waves continue breaking gently against the cliff rocks. The olive trees continue whispering with the night breeze. And somewhere, over the calm waters of the Ionian Sea, the full moon continues shining, generous and eternal, upon the small kingdom of Ithaca, while its king, finally at peace, sleeps deeply beside his own, wrapped in the serene certainty of having arrived, after so many years, exactly where he always belonged.